All right. So we are back with another episode of Coach's Corner University. And this month, these next 4 to 5 weeks, we're going to go over kind of the mechanisms of what make us strong, the mechanisms of hypertrophy and how we can get jacked, and then kind of interviewing some of the people in the industry that are known for those two things. So today we're going to start off with strength and how to get strong and what are some of the mechanisms of strength in general. So, Paul, how's everything going up there for you, man?
Things are going pretty well. Had a really nice weekend. The weather's been quite nice. Had a friend in town, so did the tourist thing this weekend. Kind of going through Ottawa and showing them the sights. It's a very old city, so there's a lot of history here, and so that was fun. Training's
What's
going well.
the number one thing in Ottawa that people have to see if they go there?
Parliament, the Parliament buildings.
The Parliament buildings. I'm
Ottawa's the
not.
capital. Ottawa's the
I'm not
capital of
sold.
Canada.
If it's not like a theme park or a restaurant, then it's not worth showing up for.
It's no, Ottawa's the capital of Canada. There's also so there's the Rideau Canal is about it's like 10 or 12 kilometers long, and it runs right through the middle of the city, all the way from Parliament and the Rideau River all the way through. And in the winter, it's the world's longest skating rink.
That's
So
cool.
that's pretty cool. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
history here. There's a lot of Ottawa's basically the Washington D.C. of Canada.
Okay. So is the Parliament building for like tourism, or is it still an active building where people work and
Still an active building. That's where like Congress and stuff is, or whatever Congress is called. I don't know, but yeah, it's still like a political building. And then there's like the Superior Court of Canada is all in the same area. A lot of other government buildings, and all the government buildings are like old stone buildings, so it's pretty cool. Like Parliament looks like a castle. Parliament looks like uh what's the like big building in London, like with Big Ben.
that's what I was going to go for, Big Ben. No, I don't
Yeah,
know after
that.
that.
But it Ottawa, like the Parliament buildings, look like a smaller version of that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, it sounds boring, but whatever floats your boat, man.
It's super boring.
Biggest attraction, Ottawa, Parliament buildings. Okay, I'm gonna fucking hard pass on that.
I mean, nature is cool too. Like there's a lot of nature.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Maybe we can do yoga together out there or something.
Okay, of the two of us, you're the only one who does yoga, so you can't chirp me for that.
Very, very flexible. I could almost reach the back of my neck. It's getting pretty good.
I low bar squatted today, so that's.
Did you?
I did.
Did you break off in millions of pieces due to overuse injuries, due to all your years of low bar squatting?
No, I had a really shitty hip shift on my top set, but it didn't hurt, so that's good.
Huh. So how do you when you see something like that as a coach, what's the thought process? How do you delineate what's the mechanism, what's going on there? How do you fix that?
Oh, for me, the bar rolled on my back. I didn't get my elbows down hard enough, and when I hit the hole, the bar rolled up my back, so I automatically defaulted into that shitty hip.
So you twisted or you shot your hips
Both.
back?
Both. So my hips shot back. I shifted to my right side and then rotated my left side forward. But
Nice.
I mean, in terms of how hard it was, until that shitty rep, it was moving really well. So, and the fact that it didn't hurt for me is a win, because usually if I would have had a rep like that, I wouldn't have been able to finish my workout. But I got through the rest of my workout and everything was fine. So it's just a matter of low bar squatting more often to get that rack position more stable. And then I think as well, my belt may have been too tight because I haven't really low bar squatted in a while.
Are
So
you
I
getting
don't know.
fat?
No,
You
I'm
look
skinny,
fat.
man.
Your cheeks look chubby. You look swollen.
Bro, I had
Maybe it's that time of the month.
23,000 steps the last 2 days in a row.
Yeah, but how many calories?
Did I eat?
A lot, it looks like. Your face says a lot.
There could be things at play contributing to puffy face.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
No, but I'm only 230.
Oh, you look 250 in the face.
Sick.
That looks like it's 205.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not looking good, man.
oh.
Good thing there's a lot of nature in Ottawa and not a lot of beaches.
It's like 5 beaches in Ottawa.
Oh, okay. How do you define a beach, first off?
Sand and water.
That's such bullshit. Okay? That is not a beach. Emma took me to this beach in Ohio. And let me tell you, compare that to California beaches or Florida beach. It's not a fucking beach.
Bro, you can't, that's comparing it's like comparing apples to Chevrolet Aveos. It's like not even the same class.
But then it shouldn't be classified as the same thing.
Okay. What
You
would
tell
like
me
to
we're
call
going
it
to a
then?
beach and you know that I'm coming from Florida to a beach. There should be higher expectations. What you should call it is a shithole with some water in it.
That would be a more accurate statement to call what we have here as beaches for sure.
Thank you. I'm glad we can finally get to the bottom of that.
So let me ask you this. When you go to the beach, do you wear a t-shirt?
A t-shirt to the beach? No. No. When I get to the beach, I mean, I'll wear a t-shirt in my car. I don't want to be that douchebag that drives around with no shirt in his car.
Especially because you drive a Jag.
I'll wear a t-shirt, and then when I get to the beach, I'll take it off. There has to be an unveiling process so people know, like, oh, he's about to take his shirt off. That's, I have like a band behind me that plays a song, and everyone
Like a
knows
mariachi band?
No, more like a like when the Queen and King come out, Parliament,
Like trumpets?
monarchy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you shave your back or no?
Of course. Of course. You don't go out in public super hairy.
Did the hair migrate from your head to your back? Is the question.
No. It just immediately disappeared on the top, and there was no migration going on. It's DHT look for sure.
It's a good look. You should grow a mustache. We should be Coach's Corner you with mustaches.
I don't think so.
I'm gonna get a neck tattoo actually.
Anytime I have any recollection of facial hair, it's immediately, when are you gonna grow your beard back? I'm like, fuck, man, I just haven't shaved in a week. Like, just give me a break. I'm not growing it back.
It'd be cool if you did, though.
It took 20 minutes in the morning to get it ready. I'm not doing that. That's so stupid.
Yeah, that's fair. How do you feel about neck tattoos?
Depends.
I'm gonna go neck tattoo on this side and then hand tattoo on this side.
I like hand tattoos, but if you get a hand and neck tattoo, then you start acting like you know how to fight and you're a badass. That's when I don't like it.
I'm gonna get sick and dope across my knuckles.
Are you really getting these tattoos, or are you just wasting time? Because
I'm getting the hand tattoos and the neck tattoos, but I'm not getting sick and dope on my knuckles.
why you have so much extra space on your body? Why would you get a neck tattoo?
I'm not like across the front. I'm like on the side.
Why? It's such a shitty spot to get a tattoo. Like, you can't do much with it. There's only a certain amount of art you can get on there, and it's small and it looks stupid a lot of times on people.
Well, maybe your neck is small. Mine is huge.
What are you gonna get on your neck?
I have no idea yet.
Oh,
I just know
God.
I want
you
a
just
neck
want
tattoo.
a neck tattoo. That's so stupid. You
Thanks,
sound like
man.
a 12-year-old girl asking their mom, like, "Can I get my ears pierced? Why do you want your ears pierced?" I don't know. I just want my ears pierced, Mom.
I'm just trying to be as unemployable as possible.
Oh God, you're gonna regret that.
I don't know. We're doing pretty good.
Are you going through something? 35 years old.
I didn't really want to bring
crisis?
this up on the podcast.
Neck tattoos, fist tattoos. You want to be unemployable?
Yeah.
It's an early midlife crisis, man.
Is it really early midlife for guys like us?
Maybe. Maybe. All right. How do we get strong, Paul? How do we get strong? What are
We
some
lift weights, and then magic happens in our bodies. And
Jesus
the next
Christ.
time we lift weights, we can get more weights on the bar to lift. No, so in terms of strength, we have to look at, the we'll say physiological changes that happen within the body, in terms of muscle fibers and we'll call structural changes, and then we can look at the neurological changes that occur, right? So every time we are lifting weights, depending on how we do it, we talked about different periodization models and exercise selection and things like that in the previous month. Well, how does all of that play in to the structural and neurological changes that take place within the body and allow us to ultimately put more weight on the bar? Now, the research surrounding that in terms of strength is going to dictate that, we've discussed as well, the neurological changes that take place in terms of motor learning, in terms of, executing a single repetition maximum, that lifting heavy for singles is going to make you strong, right? Specificity is what's going to drive strength more so than hypertrophy stimulus. But we also know that muscle cross-sectional area tends to be correlated with strength gains. So if we have a bigger muscle and then we make that bigger muscle more neurologically efficient, we get it stronger, right? So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is, right, and not to belabor the point more, but I was listening to the Stronger by Science podcast, and one of the studies they looked at, Greg Knuckles was talking about, they took 3 groups of squatters, and I call myself weak because I am weak, but I'm still stronger than what science calls advanced trainees. Yeah. So I'm happy about that. They took these 3 groups of squatters, and I think like the beginner group, their squat was like 1.25 times body weight. The intermediate group was like 1.5, and the advanced group was like 1.75 or something like that. Well, I mean, it's science, man. That's what you're gonna get when you're trying to get a big cohort. That's what you're gonna get.
Yeah. Of course.
If it was a case study, then it would be something different. But even in the case study I looked at, right, this power lifter was lifting for over 10 years, and he had a 220 kilogram squat. Not really super impressive. I would have hung it up.
Yeah, I would have.
Yeah.
I would have packed it in.
If I've been lifting for 10 years and my best squat's 484, it's like, this is not my sport. Maybe look into something a little bit more body specific, like bike riding or.
I think I squatted 484 when I was 18.
Right. Well, you do have a great squat too, so that helps. But yeah, the study was looking at, and they found that the medium squatters had actually more lean body mass, but they were still weaker than the stronger, more advanced group, which kind of begs the questions like, well, does hypertrophy lead to strength? And if you look at a lot of the research, there's some correlations to it for sure, but is that a mechanism that we should be putting a lot of effort into, right? And you want to think about like, okay, well, what are some of all the factors that affect strength? And Chris Beardsley put together a beautiful diagram and kind of covering some of it. And like you said, it's the muscle, it's the tendon, and it's the nervous system. Those are the 3 kind of things that affect strength, and also where you begin strength as well. Your starting strength plays a big factor as well, because it kind of tells you your genetic predisposition to whether or not you're going to be strong. Not all the time. And we've heard stories of guys who, I remember Brandon, well, I don't know if it's true or not, but I remember Brandon Lilly telling a story where he went in his high school, and he squatted like the bar and a plate, and it buried him. And then, and then he became a pretty good squatter in his day. Take that for what it's worth.
Bill Gillespie said the same thing too.
Okay, so maybe Brandon took Bill Gillespie's story like he took Brian Carroll's programming. Who knows? Who's to say, right? I don't know, speculations. But so you think about, right, like starting strength is a determinant in the covariant, but So when it comes to like muscle, you think muscle cross-sectional area is one, right? Because typically the bigger the cross-sectional area, the more force it can produce is the idea. And if you can produce more force, then hopefully you'll be able to generate more strength. You also have the muscle fascicle length is another one. You have the pennation angle of the muscle is another one as well. The muscle moment arm length, right? And we know that as far as like people who are built certain ways can lift more weight due to moment arms and things of that nature, morphological
Leverage, yeah.
leverages. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Muscle fiber type, people that are more type 2 dominant are going to tend to be a lot more stronger, and they're tending to be a little bit more explosive. So that plays a big role in determining whether or not you're going to be a better lifter or if you're built more for like aerobic capacity. Ability to transmit force laterally. And then you also have myofilament packing density, right? So those are kind of what Chris Beardsley has looked through the research and found that these are the muscle things that affect strength the most.
It's really interesting because in listening to that, it leads me to believe that, so we mentioned cross-sectional area. But if you have a bigger cross-sectional area, you're probably going to be a bigger person, which is going to improve your leverages, which is going to improve the carrying angle of the muscle, which is going to change everything up and down the chain. And then if you're more type 2 dominant, you're probably going to have more elastic tendons. So there would be a lot of crossover within those factors, because very, very rarely will you have, someone who has very long muscle bellies and short tendons who's as reactive or explosive as someone with shorter muscle bellies and long tendons, right? That whole like sprinter calves, right? So that is interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of it is what genetic predispositions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't train you could argue that you might be able to train your tendons to be a bit more elastic, maybe, but that's pretty much something you're born with or not.
Yeah, I mean, you can train. Elastic is a tough one, right? But you can train. The idea of training like your Golgi tendon organ to be less inhibitory is something that the compensatory acceleration training is built upon, right?
Plyometrics, yeah.
Yeah, that type of stuff. But yeah, it is interesting, right? Like he summarizes each one of these things, and fascicle length contributes more to strength gains when strength tests involve peak contractions at longer muscle length. So it's like when you take advantage of the fascicle length, then it can produce strength, but in disadvantageous positions, it may not be as applicable. So that's kind of a wash, so to speak, right? In terms of things that can produce.
Or it's an argument towards technical improvement. Right? It's an argument towards refining your technique, making your technique more efficient, making it more repeatable, and making sure that you're in the best positions possible to leverage your muscles.
Yeah, anything you can do to improve that leverage, right? And that's kind of the same thing with the pennation angle type stuff. Like if you're improving the pennation angle, then you're going to have better leverages. And he says here, because more pinnated muscles rotate more than less pinnated muscles. So by rotation, you're going to be able to produce a little bit more force and velocity.
To clarify for people who don't know what pennation angle is, the fibers on a muscle run on a diagonal. So that angle of that diagonal would be dictated as the pennation angle.
Yeah. And then, I mean, moment arms we see all the time, right?
Right.
But that's also morphological, right? This is muscle moment arm. And he states that moment arm length increases after strength training. A faster muscle shortening velocity will be needed to achieve a given joint angular velocity during lifting. And this will reduce muscle force at this speed. So that's an interesting one, right? Like the reduction of muscle force at a certain speed is something that maybe the force velocity relationship, right? The people that are more fast twitchy, more produce more force, but then when they get under load, right, they either miss or they don't. They can't grind out lifts.
Yep.
So I always find that interesting, right? That your body may be more mechanistically designed to have better velocity based type of training than it is to have kind of grind type of training.
You think that would play a part in the non-responsiveness of some people to speed work?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that would have to.
Interesting.
That, and on top of like the way they define speed work too, leaves a lot to
Yeah,
be
true.
desired as well. So it's hard to say that there is true non-responsiveness to speed work. It's hard to say that there's true non-responsiveness to any type of training, because it's like, well, you look at some of those studies, and you're like, that's not really training, but you know, debatable. I mean, for me, right, the biggest ones are things that you can't really improve on. Yeah, you can shift your fiber type, right? If you're more slow dominant, you can start to shift your fiber type towards faster fiber twitches by training exclusively in those rep ranges that produce that, which means you're not doing almost any aerobic work whatsoever. You're mostly doing singles, doubles, and just really fast movement, fast twitch, or heavy, heavy things. Um, but it seems like a lot of the muscular adaptations, besides cross-sectional area, doesn't really seem to like elicit, to me at least, a huge improvement in strength. Right? Would you agree
Or
or disagree with that?
so you're saying that the everything except cross-sectional area wouldn't improve?
It would improve, but at such like a minuscule level that I don't know if it would be that important to focus on improving the muscle capacity as it would be to improve the nervous system capacity, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think when looking at a lot of those factors, they're predominantly genetically determined.
Right.
So it's almost more like a control which you can control situation. So
Exactly.
yeah, so if cross-sectional area is something that we can control, well, then it makes sense to devote some time and energy there. Because if you did devote some time and energy there, likely those other qualities would improve as well.
Yeah, and I would have to assume, and no knock at powerlifters for this, but the people that genetically are predisposed to these muscular traits, they're probably fucking playing college football somewhere, or they're playing like real sports. They're not necessarily playing powerlifting on the weekends with their friends in their garages, right?
I, I still remember a meme I saw when I was much younger. It was like powerlifting, a sport for people too short to play real ones.
Me and Emma were having this debate earlier today about sports, right? How to classify sport. And for me, I classify sport as something that will help improve athleticism over time, right? And I think about what's the one sport that deteriorates pretty much everything that you do in your life from a pure athletic standpoint, and it's powerlifting.
I would qualify a sport as something where you're required to move your feet, probably.
Well, do you,
Powerlifting, you're literally not allowed to move your
because you
feet.
because you're too motor retarded to do that, right? That's the thing.
I mean, I resemble that remark, but
What about
um,
swimming? Is swimming a sport?
okay, swimming I would say is a sport, but training swimmers in the weight room is the funniest thing in the world. They can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. They have no idea how to put any force into the floor. They're like walking noodles.
And that's why I wouldn't consider it a sport, right? Because it's devaluing their athleticism at so many levels, right? Like if you get really good at swimming, that doesn't mean you can come out of the water and then all of a sudden that's going to transfer over to your cardiovascular abilities to be a good runner, to be a good anything, right? But if you get good at, like, say, football, you can transfer that over into probably being pretty good at baseball, probably being pretty good at basketball. You can probably run track. You can probably, right? To me, that's what a sport is. I know we're getting off topic here, but
I think that's more a definition of athleticism.
which what I said, that's how I define a sport, is your ability to improve athleticism.
I
I mean, the spelling bees on
I
ESPN,
know
I
where
wouldn't quantify that as a goddamn sport.
I know where this is coming from. It's Joe Sullivan's post about, like, if you don't think powerlifting is a sport, you
Oh
suck at
no.
powerlifting.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you posted anything about that.
He posted it. It was like one of those blank screens with writing. It was like, if you don't think powerlifting is a sport, you probably suck at powerlifting. And
The dumbest thing.
I wanted to reply. I was like, I'm pretty sure anything that doesn't allow you to move your feet isn't a sport.
That's the stupidest. I mean, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Right? Ask Russell Ori if powerlifting is a sport compared to him playing college football. I mean, one of the strongest guys. But anyways, okay. So central nervous system, right?
Yep.
You have voluntary activation, antagonist co-activation, coordination, and synergist of or stabilizer activation. Those are kind of the four mechanisms that he was going after in terms of improving your strength from a central nervous system perspective. So based on those things, right? Voluntary contraction, increases in voluntary contraction by either motor unit recruitment or rate coding can increase muscular force after strength training, but changes in rate coding are likely more influential when strength tests involve faster speeds. So the idea of voluntary activation is that that's that neural capacity, right? Like you're training in a way to where you're able to recruit more and more things voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to allow you to produce more force. That's going to allow you to be a lot stronger because you're practicing those moves. You're practicing those specific 1 reps or 2 reps or really, really heavy weight. That's going to require you to bring in all the different motor units and all the different things to produce force at a higher propensity. So then it's easier and easier to recruit every single time.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So to go like, if we're able to recruit more motor units, and you'll talk about like high threshold motor units that are only going to get recruited under maximal loads or maximal speeds, then you're going to you're refining your patterns. And whenever I think of patterns, I think of the concept of engrams. Have you ever, yeah. So like essentially you're able to perform the same movement under varying conditions to a greater degree because you're more efficient in your patterns and you have more practice with it. And then talking about like reciprocal, like co-contraction. So if you're more efficient, there's going to be less inhibition by antagonist musculature in the eccentric pattern. So you're going to be able to again recruit more motor units in the muscles that are under load. And then over time, like for me, I've always looked at the neurological component as like moving the glass ceiling, right? Because if your technique sucks, you will get stronger at moving the weight. Over time, you will get stronger, but there will be this glass ceiling where you just can't seem to get past it, either because you can't tolerate enough loading without getting hurt, because the pattern provides an overload to musculature that can't tolerate it. But as soon as you improve your technique into more efficient patterns and more consistently executed over time, that glass ceiling of how strong you can possibly get just continues to move up. I like the four factors contributing. Part of me, okay, so full disclosure, part of me loves compartmentalizing things and adding specific names to them, but we're really just talking about technique here.
Yeah, technique and efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, right, it's like if efficiency and technique are some of the biggest things, right? Because efficiency is also important because the more efficient you are with your movement patterns, the more often you can train it because the less damage you're occurring, right? So that's something that I always think about is like, how can we create less damage and become more efficient? Whereas like hypertrophy, right? You want to challenge the muscle as much as you can. So you're going to train in maybe a less efficient pattern to challenge the muscle. You're going to disinhibit the moment arms. You're going to make them longer. You're going to make them harder so you can challenge the muscle. But in a sport where you're trying to be as strong as you possibly can, you're trying to be as efficient as possible, even in terms of like endurance athletes, runners, right?
Yeah.
The more efficient the runner is, the less muscle damage they have. So the more they can train, the more bounding they're going to be doing, the more they're going to rely on their tendons to elicit that production of force instead of their muscles. So that efficiency allows them to get more miles in, to get more total volume and to get more practice in with their movements. And I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to efficiency, right?
Well, and in terms of strength, like if you move a weight in a more efficient manner, that means for a given load, you must produce less force. So every repetition becomes less challenging. And if you can do more work at a less challenging rate, then you can continue to accumulate strength over time. As soon as you either have technical faults that lead to inefficient positions, well, the whole goal of assistance work is to correct those, we'll call them weak areas, so that you can achieve these more efficient positions in the main lift and then continue to drive your strength up.
So I guess the question would be then, if efficiency is something that we're looking to improve, at what load capacity and what dynamic is the lifter able to create efficiency, right? Because, like, 30%, you can move 30%, it can feel light, but it'll move like shit if you're not cognizant of it, right? So at what load discrepancy does the efficiency to get stronger actually start to come into play, right? If you're doing, and that depends on,
Number of repetitions.
the number of repetitions, right? But let's just say, and I don't think they've ever done any research on this, but let's just say, it's anywhere between 80 to 100% is where that percentage needs to be in order for you to build that efficiency. Well, if that's the case, then that should delineate how many reps you're able to do, right? If you go beyond those repetitions into that 70 to 80% range, then that could be termed maybe junk volume, right? To where you're doing stuff within such a low intensity, such a low percentage, that you're not able to actually train in an efficient manner because it's not challenging enough for you to need to be efficient. You don't need to dial in technique with 70 to 80%. And by the time you do, you're in such a fatigued state because you're accumulating volume that it doesn't look the same anyways, is one of the things that I think about, right? When programming movements that require efficiency and require skill acquisition. It's like, why would we put them in such a far spectrum of lower percentages just to accumulate volume? If we're doing a 5x10 at 65 to 70%, I just don't see the value in that. I don't like what would be the value in something along those lines, right? I just don't understand. If your sport is a single and a squat at the heaviest weight possible, I would, people make fun of Louis Simmons, but his reverse band SSB to a box single is more specific than a fucking 5x10 squat at 65%.
Yeah, I think the only argument for that like high volume approach would be like beginners trying to suss out their technique and suss out like the positions that fit best for them, because they just need to do the exercise more. But you could argue the same, like I'd rather have that person do 10 sets of 5 than 5 sets of 10.
Right.
The other piece here is like, well, if we're looking at efficient mechanics, we know that we don't want to accumulate junk volume. We know that we likely need to be at or above an RPE of 7. So we're looking at percentages there. If we're looking at 1 to 3 repetitions, above 85%.
Right.
Because then every repetition above 85% is going to be a quote unquote meaningful repetition. But we don't need to do that much of it, right? We need that top single or that top double to feel the weight, have to turn on cognitively, get there and be like, okay, I'm going to dial in my technique here and I have to be perfect. And then we're going to move on to another exercise or move on to the rest of the training session. I think this is something that I'm coming to like realize. People don't need a ton of volume to make strength progress.
That goes against the research though, yeah?
It does to a certain extent. But what I'm seeing is like on that specific work with my athletes anecdotally, I'm doing far less volume with them than I ever have. And they're making much more progress, much quicker and with less issues.
Right. Because to me, volume is one of the biggest drivers of building compensation patterns, building fatigue, and delineating into injuries, right? So it's like, if we can avoid that, why wouldn't we avoid that? But the people that build their straw man on volume is the biggest driver of change, whether it be hypertrophy or strength. A lot of people fall into that camp, and then you look at the research and you're like, how are you guys basing your your programming off of this type of stuff when the subjects within the research are so far removed from the people you're actually training, right? It's like it just doesn't make sense. It's like the old guard is holding on to that foothold of volume as the biggest driver of everything. But then you see anecdotally all these guys getting huge and strong on low volume training, right? You have Ian Valiers, you have Jordan Peters, you have all these guys that are like low volume, 6 to 8 working sets. Hunter Labrada, they're fucking huge and they're strong and they're doing less volume than, the guys that are like, I do 30 sets a week. You're like, yeah, you're 155 pounds. Congratulations. Your hypertrophy is looking really good right now. It's like, this doesn't make sense to me. Right. I mean, that's the problem, is that you can have all the science in the world, but if you're not actually opening your eyes to what's going on in the gym, right, you're at an extreme disadvantage, right? One of the best coaches in the USAPL right now is Joseph Franza or something like that. I forget
Oh,
his last name.
Joey Flex.
Joey Flex. Yeah, he's training some of the best guys, and seems like they're doing. I mean, I've seen them do high volume stuff too, but a lot of their program, it seems, predicated on a lot of singles, a lot of practice, and that's USAPL in general, right? I mean, even on that podcast with Greg Knuckles, they were talking about feats of strength, and there's a 123-pound powerlifter in USAPL that's only 12 kilos off of Steffi Cohen's all-time deadlift record. Right?
Wow.
It's like you're taking someone who's natural, and these natural people are catching up to these enhanced people. And I mean, I don't know if Steffi runs a bunch of drugs or not, but I've seen some of these girls' drugs protocols, and they're running stuff that you would assume would be unattainable for natural people, but they're doing it. And I think they're doing it because they're doing better programming. They're understanding that volume may not always be the best driver, but practice and specificity may be a little bit better, right? But I think we can all come to that consensus that, like, the more specific you can be in training, the better off you're going to be. But how do we stay specific without getting injured, without getting worn out, without getting burnt out? What should the rest of your program be? Because if everything you do in your program is like neural drive and efficiency, then you're doing squat, bench, and deadlift for singles, doubles, and triples every single day of the week. And it's like, mentally, you're going to be done. And we know that if you look at the literature, I mean, we don't really know, but if you can start to parse out some of the literature and fatigue, right, those are very acute things. But if you start to think that, man, this training is hard mentally, that's when you start to get unmotivated. Yeah. That's when like fatigue starts to really kick in. So how does, it's one thing to say like, hey, practice and singles and all that stuff is going to drive the best adaptations, but that's not the entire program. And I think that's the thing that I get annoyed with when people talk about, you got to do singles and you get neural drives, the most important thing, but it's like, well, what else is there to it, right? So then what else would you think about in terms of like dynamics of making someone strong within a program after we've done the skill acquisition portion of it, the neural drive portion of it?
Right. So I just want to delineate too that I think one of the things that is a limitation in the research, and you alluded to it, is the loads being lifted by the highest level lifters can't even begin to be correlated with the loads lifted in the research.
Right.
Right. Like if you talk about, someone who does 3 sets of 10 at a 10 rep max, their total volume might be, 3,000 pounds. But you could do 3,000 pounds in a single set if you're moving, 700 for reps.
Right.
So it's looking at that as a term of like, okay, well, 700 for reps is going to be more taxing, and you can't do multiple sets. You can't do a lot of volume with those types of loads. And I mean, I shouldn't say can't, because I'm sure there's someone out there who's getting crazy strong doing ridiculous amounts of reps with heavy weights, but they're few and far between. And I think that, success leaves clues, as they say. But in terms of the way I look at programming and what the rest of the program looks like after our practice work is addressing weak areas, maybe rate limiters to our competition lifts. I look at um, getting into positions to improve postural awareness or postural resilience, um, and reinforcing the positions in which we need to be in. So for the upper body, we focus on building up the pressing musculature, then focus on building up the musculature of the back to support a strong press, and then put in some movements to keep those shoulders moving freely and keep them healthy under that low bar squat, and in that torqued position on the bench press. For the deadlift, look at reinforcing core strength, lat strength. Um, that's where the hypertrophy work comes in. Right? That's where we focus on that muscle cross sectional area. Then we look at for the squat, building up the legs, having some big juicy quads. Um, it's my word of the month actually. And
You're so hip.
well, did you notice my floral patch on my tank top?
Did now.
There you go. Yeah. So in terms of how we program that, we need to look at how much of our resources are going to be allocated to practicing that main lift, what that's going to look like, what period of the year that we're training in. How we structure the rest of the work is, where do we need the bulk of our work? Do we have glaring weaknesses that are holding us back from performing the lifts the way we need them to be performed? Or we need to devote more time to hitting getting some more resilience in these postures or positions that are required for that main lift. Right? Like taking the example from earlier in our conversation, I was talking about how my low bar squat, I was having trouble with my rack position. Well, you're absolutely right. I'm going to make some changes to my upper body training to get some more postural resilience in my external rotators, get my internal rotators a little looser so that I can get into that low bar position a little bit more comfortably. Right? These are things that matter. Like, I glossed over it, but I'm going to make some changes based on that. Right. So that's
Yeah,
what you look at as a programmer.
that's a great point, man. I think a lot of people neglect, right? They'll do a squat or they'll do a deadlift and they're like, "Oh, this is weak." Right? It's like, "Oh, my quads are weak." And it's like, "Oh, my lats are weak in the deadlift. So that's what I'm going to work on." And they don't look at like, "Oh, well, my posture's lacking here. What exercises can I do to improve my posture that's going to improve my positions? If my positions improve, then my efficiency improves. And if that improves, then I can train more often, right?" And I think that that's something that you just touched on. That's extremely important. Everyone's always so focused on trying to drive adaptation for hypertrophy because they think that that's going to be the biggest driver of their success to get stronger, because everyone tells them more volume, bigger muscles are going to make you stronger. And it's like they're neglecting all the other important things like injury prevention, increasing range of motion, all those type of things, those exercises that, you know, make you feel better leaving the gym, right? How many people think about these are X amount of exercises I'm going to pick today, so when I leave the gym, I don't feel like a bag of trash. Where other people are like, how can I run myself into the ground so that I leave the gym every day feeling like I did something? And I think when I look at like the central nervous system and fatigue and all those things that the research has shown, it's like if you can start to leave the gym feeling better and feeling accomplished and not feeling beaten down, then your likelihood of returning to that gym the next day refreshed and ready to go is going to be higher because your mental capacity is going to be so much better, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the Daniel Kahneman talks about this all the time. It's your remembering self versus your remembering self versus your, I'm blanking on it now, but if you guys remember the Daniel Kahneman thing, type that in below. But the idea is, right, like experiential. Yeah, your remembering self versus your experiential self. And the research he cited was that if people put their hand in cold water for 60 seconds versus putting their hand in cold water for 60 seconds, followed by warm water for 30 seconds, which one would they prefer every single time? And they preferred the warm water every single time, but they still had their hand in the cold water the same amount of time, right? So by being able to leave a training session feeling better and not feeling absolutely wrecked, and knowing that you can go to the next one and you're like, man, I feel really good and I'm ready to perform, that's going to be more indicative of your ability to not reach fatigue states, right? You're going to be able to train more often, right? So you're always kind of thinking about what exercises can I push that's not going to make me feel like trash? And then what exercises can I put in there that I don't necessarily have to take to failure, but are just exercises to put in to challenge muscles, to challenge ranges of motion, right? If you look at the injury prevention literature on athletes in sports, mostly like soccer, rugby, and football, they talk a lot about Nordic curls being something that if it's implemented into your program, your risk of hamstring injuries goes down tremendously. But it's not something that they're trying to progressively overload, right? They're not trying to get better at it. They're like, oh, if I do 3 sets of 10, my risk of hamstring tears are going to go down. So when you're programming for something, it's like, hey, if I do 3 sets of 10 with external rotation so that I can open up better, and then I follow that up with some type of end range stretch that gets me a little bit further into external rotation. So then when I load it again, it's even further. I don't have to progress that. I can progress the range of motion. I can progress some other things, but I don't have to progress load. I don't have to make it harder, right? And it's not always about like, how can my program be harder? How can it run me into the ground? I think there has to be some consideration of like what exercises are going to lend themselves to, having better carryover into the next day's lift as well, right? If you're benching and your hips are always tight and you can't get into a great position after squat day, that's because the exercises you picked on squat day are fucking up your bench. Pick different exercises. If you only know, and that's the problem, right? People think like, oh, but this exercise, this is the one that's going to
This
build
is
up my
the
squat,
one.
right? It's like, no, it's like, that's not the one. There's so many other exercises you can pick that's not going to leave you trashed for your next day, right? And someone who's done that pretty well is Kevin Oak, right? He's figured out like, hey, if I low bar squat all the time, my bench goes to shit, but I can maintain my squat by still doing heavy other things like a Zercher squat or like a SSB squat.
Oh.
And yeah, I know he does heavy.
Didn't he Zercher like 6+?
Something crazy, yeah.
Fuck that guy.
But he found ways to keep his shoulders healthy so he could bend, right? So it's like that type of consideration is extremely important, right? Don't fall in love with exercises, because I have a client right now who's like he'll go and his shoulders fucked up and his back's fucked up, and he'll go see someone and he'll get fixed and like, yeah, I'm feeling good, I'm ready to start training again. I do his nutrition. He's like, I'm ready to start training again. And then he goes back into his program and like a couple weeks later he's like, oh, I feel like shit, everything's back to being fucked up. I'm like, that's your program. It's your program. It's it's the exercises you're choosing that are causing these issues. You can go see a doctor X amount of times or a therapist X amount of times. If you don't fix your program, you're going to continue to like beat this thing into a bloody pulp to where you're not able to do anything.
Yeah, I think that's something that gets very undervalued. And I also have a kind of a question, but also something that I've seen as well. So we talk about these massive bodybuilders who are using a low volume approach, but are also super fucking strong.
Yeah.
Who's to say that there isn't carryover from doing heavy reps to failure just on a machine? That neural drive from pushing reps close to failure or high RPE or zero RIR, those last 3 repetitions, even if you're in bodybuilding rep ranges, right? You're still going to recruit those high threshold motor units. You're still going to learn how to strain against weights. I think that holds a tremendous amount of value. When you look at the assistance work and what you're choosing. Because if you choose appropriate movements that you connect well with and that you can push close to failure, I think that ability to strain under load and build like big, strong muscles is going to have a crazy carryover. I think where people not get into trouble, but miss the boat is they'll do their, top single back downs, and then they'll go on a leg press and do 5 sets of 10.
Right.
Just pumping it out. Well, that's junk volume. You're not getting anything out of that in terms of hypertrophy stimulus. What you're going to do is you're going to beat up your knees, you're going to beat up your hips. Why not do one working set, 10 to 12 reps as hard as you can, learn how to straight, right? And then move on to the next exercise. You just got more work out of that one set than you did from those like 10 rep and reserve sets of 10.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you look at like some of the literature on that, right? Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit, and they talk about, she went to a professor. It's the guy, Eric Anders, who he did research on the 10,000 hour rule.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And everyone should be pretty familiar with that rule. 10,000 hours is what you need to put in to become an expert at something. And she was like, over the years, I've ran every single day, and I guarantee I put in over 10,000 hours of running, but I'm not an expert. I'm not a better runner than I was when I first started. And he was like, yeah, because you're not doing deliberate practice. He's like, when you go to run, are you trying to get faster? She's like, no, I'm just running to go run. He's like, oh, do you have a coach? She's like, no, why would I need a coach? I'm just running. And he just started going down this list of things. And she was just going to run without any intention, right? And that's the same thing. If you go from a squat where you're putting all your effort into it, then you're like, okay, time for accessories, leg press. I need to gather as much volume as possible, 5 sets of 10. You're just going through the motions. There's no deliberate effort there. There's nothing that you can really confidently say that like I've challenged this muscle and it's getting bigger and stronger. And Eric Helms on his pod, what's up?
I failed on the pendulum squat today.
Look at you. I'm proud of you.
It was very unpleasant.
It's not fun.
It was on 6 reps.
Ooh, that's heavy.
Well, because I did 5 plates for 10 last time I did it. I was like, I'll just go 5.5. Stapled.
Yep. Yeah. When you do a heavy set of 6 to failure, it's hard from rep 1.
Oh, rep 1, I was like, oh my God, this is awful.
Yeah.
And then it just got progressively worse. Rep 5, it felt like I watched the video and it was not slow, but it was definitely not fast. But it felt like a million years. And then I hit the bottom with that 6 and just kind of pushed out to that, like maybe me at 45, where all the stack hits you. And I was just not going anywhere. So just like gingerly put it down.
Nice. But yeah, I was listening.
That has carryover. Yeah.
It does. I was listening to Eric Helms talk about this. They did a whole podcast on specificity on his on Iron Culture. And they were talking about how specificity doesn't just mean 1 rep max low bar squat, right? Specificity could also mean I need to build up my quads. What's the most specific way to do that, right? What's going to lend itself to building up my quads? It's like, well, probably the leg press, right? But people that fall in love with specificity, they're like, well, if I squat, then I have to follow that up with some type of accessory squat. And then I have to follow that up with some type of other barbell movement, or, and they get so afraid to do the machines and to push themselves on that. And then when they get on the machines, it's like, oh, it must be like 4 sets of 15 to 20 on these machines, right? It's like, I'll do a heavy single squat, and then I'll do my back down work, and I'll do a hack squat for like a heavy 6. And then I'll just progressively continue to overload that hack squat for 6. And I'll do 1 set, and that's it. And my quads are done. I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah. I'm getting to the point where I'm like realizing how little actual assistance volume I need to keep making progress.
You just need to train it hard as fuck.
Yeah, exactly. You just need to fucking kill that 1 set, or like 1 set and then a back down. And even like, so today I did a top set of 4, 1 set of 4 paused. I wanted to do 2, but I did 4. I did 1 set because my elbows were kind of fucked and I didn't want to ruin the rest of my week. So that's something I'll take into consideration for future sessions. I did that heavy set of pendulum and then a back down. And then I did 2 sets on the back attack. And then I did 3 sets of really light leg extensions, not to failure, just because for me, the leg extension is more of a rehab exercise. That's it.
Yeah.
And I was fucking smoked. I left. I was like, all right, I'm going to be smoked tomorrow, and my knees
Yeah.
aren't going to be sore. My quads are going to be sore.
Right. And that's the important thing, right? It's like my joints aren't fucked up. It's like my muscles are. And that's something that can lend itself to years and years of longevity in the sport, right? And everyone, the big thing that everyone espouses is like for every push, you need to do a pull. And it's like, how about for every barbell movement, you need to do some type of corrective movement, or for every barbell movement, you need to do some type of machine, right? People get so inundated with their sport, and really driving home, like if I'm a barbell athlete, then most of my lifts have to be barbell. If I want to squat and get big legs, then I have to squat to get big legs. I'm like, man, I've squatted 800 pounds and I'm next to bodybuilders who can barely squat 500, and their legs are fucking so much bigger than mine. And that's because legs, for me, squats didn't build up my quads, right? They build up my adductors and my hamstrings and my glutes. But if I fell into that idea of like squats are the best way to build up my legs, then I would have never had quads, right? I would have missed that whole opportunity.
Now, I personally do see value in using variations of the competition movements to bias certain muscle groups, right? So I'm still a big fan of front squats, still a big fan of safety bar squats, depending on the need of the lifter, right? But that doesn't mean that that takes the place of the practice competition movement. And that also doesn't mean that it takes the place of assistance work geared towards building the quads. It's just a way to have some sort of relatively specific work within a squatting pattern. And then we get on the machines, right? So like for me, I find when my front squat is going really well, my squat looks great. So I'm always going to front squat in some capacity within my training rotation, because for me, it works well. And I've found the same thing with other athletes. The safety bar worked really well for me for a long time. Haven't seen it carry over well lately. So I'm not going to do as much safety bar work.
No.
But how many people do we see that are like, oh, well, the safety bar builds big squats, so I got a safety bar squat.
Oh yeah, all the time with no dynamic correspondence whatsoever. It's like it's
Yeah.
off season, must be safety squat time. It's like, why?
Yeah. And like I wouldn't say victim to it because my squat continued to go up, but I would safety bar squat for like 3-4 months at a time without touching a low bar. And then I would have to spend the first 3 weeks of prep getting used to the elbow pain and the shoulder pain and all the fucked up like rack position. Like, oh, guess I'm low bar squatting again. Don't know where to put my hands.
Right. Right. Or you don't know because you haven't low bar squatted all year, that you don't know what compensation patterns, or you don't know what needs to be fixed, or you don't know any. Yeah.
My favorite, I have videos of like my first low bar squats from previous preps. And like in the hole, my hands are completely open. The bar's just like in my fingers. I'm like, oh, this is totally good.
Yeah. And then if you do find an exercise like a front squat, right, you have to ask yourself, like, why is this exercise so beneficial for me, right? Because that can lead to clues of what accessory work you need to do, right? So front squat may feel really good for you because one, the bar is in front of you, so it's allowing for different center of gravity. So then it's not as taxing on the back, so that you're able to recover better. And it could also be forcing you to be in a more protracted position with your shoulder blades so that you can have a better front rack position, right? Which is going to allow your shoulders to be a little bit healthier for the bench press. It's going to allow your serratus anterior and your lats to stabilize, which can carry over to the bench press. And it can also put you in positions that you're just not used to. So it's a novel stimulus as well, right? And then it just may lend itself to being a better position for you to move efficiently. And all those
Yep.
things would lead to like, okay, well, if I take the front squat out, then I need to replace that with serratus anterior work, lat work. I found benefits of not taxing my lower back. So don't let me take the front squat out and add in something that does tax my lower back even more, right? All those things you start to have to think about is like, why? Because the thing I see a lot is like this bar or this movement lended itself to good dynamic correspondence and improved everything else. But then they take that away and they don't look at all the auxiliary things of why that bar made it successful. So as soon as you take that bar away, the things that made it successful now become your accessories to continue to drive that success in the right direction.
Yeah, it's looking at like bang for your buck exercises, right? So if you got all of this additional benefit, like for me, the safety or the front squat is thoracic spine stability, core strength, and quads. So if I take out the front squat and I put another variation in that maybe doesn't get me those, now I have to start doing more thoracic spine extension work. I have to start doing more core work, and then I have to find something else to replace the stimulus on my quads.
Yep.
That's a lot of extra work when I could just fucking front squat.
Right. Yeah.
And when we look at like, specificity driving the stimulus, it's still a squat, right? So if I'm working in high RPEs and pushing that squat, I'm still going to get the neural drive, still going to get the high threshold motor unit recruitment. Like I'm getting all of those things as well. We can't automatically just say that specificity is the only thing in terms of you have to do a low bar back squat to get good at low bar back squatting.
Right.
But you can get good carryover from other movements if you're not able to do the competition movement with a high level of frequency.
Right. It's the idea of like specificities beyond just the movement, right?
Yes.
If you're doing a front squat, it's not specific to the competition movement, but if you're doing everything else with the front squat as specific to the competition movement as possible, that's going to give you the best carryover. So if you're doing, singles and doubles and triples with a front squat, right, that's still neural drive. That's still specificity for your sport that requires singles, right? So the closer you can get to that with the variations, the better carryover it's going to have. The problem
100%.
is when people go from a back squat to a front squat, and then they do the front squat for like sets of 8 to 12, and the load drops, 50%. And they're like, oh, my front squat didn't carry over to my low bar squat. It's like, yeah, because you weren't training with any weight, right?
Plus, if you're doing front squats for sets of 8 to 10,
I'm pretty sure Dan used to do that. So
no, he didn't. He never goes over sixes.
Debatable.
Listen, the dude just pulled 9 something for 4 from blocks. He can do whatever the fuck he wants.
Strong guy. I hope he makes it to a meet, man. I'd love to see him.
Although he did bench 396, so I might actually bench more than Dave Green right now.
Ooh, what happened to his bench?
He had nerve compression in his neck.
Oh,
yeah.
So is that like that's not like a Boss Rutan thing, is it?
I think it's similar. So he can't recruit that lat and tricep on the one side. He can't really recruit.
That's not good.
No, it's not. But I mean, his bench has gone up like 80 kilos or something like that from when he first started getting back to it.
So it's not completely.
It's improving.
Yeah, it's not completely gone.
No.
Okay. Yeah. And is he pulling with straps?
He pulled 804 for a paused double with no straps.
Okay, so his grip's not that
his grip's
awful
fine.
then. Yeah. Because that's something too that could be problematic with the nerves thing, is that your grip doesn't, especially if your lat's not there and you're, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much wraps up the idea of like strength and how to get stronger, right? From a pure like strength athletic perspective of powerlifting. Obviously, if you're playing other sports, that's going to be completely skewed, right? Then you have to think about, well, is strength even that important for your sport? Is a certain level of strength important? Once you get to that level, are there other characteristics that are going to be more advantageous to improve your sport, right? And that's a completely different topic and podcast. And I think we're going to cover a month of strength and conditioning stuff to the best of our ability.
I'd love that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. I mean, I spent the first 8 years of my career really researching and doing strength and conditioning for athletes and stuff. So it would be really good. And it gives people kind of a delineation of like, because this is Coach's Corner. It's not just for powerlifters. We want to be able to have other coaches and other personal trainers who aren't just going to coach powerlifters. If you're building your profession off of powerlifters, you're going to be broke for the rest of your life. So just throwing that out there. We're cheap. Powerlifters are cheap, man. That's why it's a great sport. You just need a belt and a pair of shoes. That's it.
Well, you need meet day knee sleeves. You need training knee sleeves, you need bench
see-
wraps, you need
I see power lifters coming to the gym with fucking suitcases now. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is not
You
what
were that guy.
What?
Bro, you're telling me you didn't have multiple pairs of knee wraps, multiple pairs of elbow sleeves?
No, I've never worn elbow sleeves. I had one pair of phantom knee wraps that I just wore the entire time. Never did any of that stuff. No. If I have multiple belts, it was because they were free. If I have multiple of anything, it was because they were free. That's it.
I have multiple belts because I'm a diva.
Well, you need it. You need something to total 2,000 before you end your career.
Oh, fuck.
If you don't total 2,000 and you retire from powerlifting, you're off the show. Plain and simple.
I got 2 meets coming up, brother.
When are you competing?
October in Chicago, if I'm allowed. So if I get the work visa for Coach's Corner, then I'll be able to travel for that one. And then I registered for a meet here in Edmonton, Alberta in November. So I think I'm gonna do the one in October in sleeves, and I'm gonna do the one in November in wraps.
Nice. So November is your only real chance of a 2,000 pound total.
Unless I bench 5.
Come on. Don't be silly.
Don't
say things that aren't.
I want to go. I think I can go 744 in sleeves.
That's really good.
And then I want to squat 828 in wraps, because right now the best Canadian squat of all time at 220 is Jeremy. He squatted 823.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and
good goals. Good goals. So, anything you want to end with here, or I'm pretty sure we covered a pretty good amount.
I think we covered a pretty good amount. I think the biggest thing that is a takeaway from the conversation today is a lot of the things that lead to strength gains are outside your control to some extent, right? So your genetic potential is going to be what it is, but what we can do is we can manipulate the way we perform exercises, the way we program them within the training plan to maximize, cross-sectional area and then neurological efficiency. And if you are pushing your assistance work to improve cross-sectional area, you'll have carryover to neurological efficiency if it's programmed properly. So I'm looking forward to diving into the ways we can do that, different strategies we can use, because I think that's really where people miss the boat.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well said, sir. So if you guys like the episode, please go to iTunes. It's under Coach's Corner. Leave a review and a 5-star rating. It is greatly appreciated. And we'll catch you guys next week. And if you want to join in the conversation, 4 p.m. Eastern time, just send your email. Go to coachescorneru.com, put in your email, and you'll get notifications of when we're doing these. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Next week, we'll go over hypertrophy and the mechanisms behind it and how to set up your program if hypertrophy is the specific goal. So we'll catch you guys next week.